Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll start with any of the information from the weekly readings. The article on group cohesion states that there are many different definitions of cohesion and that there are different measures by different fields and different samples. The article argues that this introduces a problem because it limits the comparability and replication of research data between studies. This issue can create confusion when defining and measuring group cohesion. One part that stood out to me was that the article mentioned how there is some evidence that supports the notion that greater group diversity leads to lower cohesion, but that Weber and Donoghue found no consistent relationship with group diversity and cohesion and group performance in a meta analysis they did in 2001. While I can see that sometimes having people from diverse backgrounds could lead to misunderstandings because obviously they all have different perspectives, I think that it's this very thing that enriches groups instead, and it could definitely positively contribute to group cohesion. The second thing that stood out to me was the 5 stages of team development, and specifically the storming stage. This is often characterized by conflict and competition due to interpersonal differences. The article states that team members must work through this stage by accepting individual differences and to work through conflicting ideas. When I think about group projects that I have had in school, the stage of storming definitely comes to mind, but in almost a different way. So, for example, in my experience, I've been in groups where we would be in the storming stage and there is conflict, but it's almost like an unspoken kind of conflict where you can see that people are uncomfortable and sometimes they may be getting annoyed with other group members, but nobody really wants to speak up and actually give a different opinion because they don't want to disrupt the peace. So, this makes me think about how groups may remain in this stage and that they could sometimes not move forward from the storming stage because the group progression is then hindered. The article about socialization and trust in work groups offered interesting reasons for paranoia among new and marginal members who often mistrust other members of their group. Here, Kramer argues that the paranoia begins when people focus on the differences between themselves and others, when they believe that they are being evaluated by others, and lastly, when they feel uncertain about their social status. In my experience, when I first started working in my current role, I felt like this sometimes just because I felt like I was not good enough. So I would sometimes feel as if I was being evaluated by others. But this, of course, had a lot to do with the fact that I was evaluating myself. So I thought that others were doing the same thing. Um, so yeah, I kind of related to that. Kramer asserts that this paranoia results in biases, such as interpreting the behavior of others in overly personal ways, attributing such behavior to sinister rather than innocent ways, and lastly, seeing conspiracies within the group. It was interesting to see how paranoia can lead to biases and that it all occurs within the minds of the new and marginal groups, whether the existing group members actually think that way or not. And then the video about group cohesion mentioned that team building exercises should happen on a continuous basis, and it highlighted 3 different types of team building: personality based, activity based, and skill based. In my experience, I have not had that many team building exercises just because it was not seen as a priority since we already kind of worked well together. But the ones that I have had were probably more activity based and maybe personality based, I would say. But I think that if all of the types were implemented, we could have achieved group cohesion much quicker. The YouTube video Company Meeting Stereotypes was really funny and it made me think about my own team. I don't think we are as obvious or maybe as extreme, but I would say that we have the get you when you can person. We have the negator, definitely the rambler, and certainly the dominator. So I found it pretty funny, and it was a fun way to kind of show the different personality types. And then, what has been done at your job to increase cohesion, and what would you suggest be done? I would say that nothing has been done in a very formal manner, but we often all have lunch together, and during this time, we sit and chat about our personal lives and we teach each other new things. I would say that this is how we get to know each other better. We also learn each other's like individual differences, and over time, I think we've been able to achieve the cohesion because we're almost more understanding towards one another because we are learning more about each other. But I would definitely suggest that we plan actual team building events, especially skills based. I think that we already know our personality differences, and I think that we work pretty well around that. But since we have, different skill sets and different roles, perhaps skill based team building could help with this because it would allow us to achieve even better team cohesion, and specifically concerning our actual day to day activities that contribute to our group goals. Okay, how would you respond if you discover someone you know was hazed by a group they recently joined? Ugh, this is something that would definitely not sit well with me because I know what it feels like and I would never want anyone else to be picked on. I would probably pull the person aside and talk to them about it to kind of see where their head is at and to ask how they are feeling. And then I would also ask them if they were comfortable with me bringing it up to our superior. If they were, I would have a conversation with our boss since I kind of have that relationship where I could talk to her about, different aspects about our job, whether it's positive or negative. And I think that she would be able to handle those kinds of situations pretty well. Um, but if the person was not comfortable, I would stand up for them when I do see it happening, and I would intervene if I could, and I would probably try to take the person out of the situation if it was at all possible. So, yeah.